Regional Municipality of Niagara Police Services Board Public Agenda Meeting. I'm Bill Steele and I'm for the Police Services Board. We begin the meeting this morning by acknowledging that the land in which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. And acknowledging reminds us that the great standard of living that we enjoy in Niagara is directly related to the resources and friendships of the Indigenous people who make up our community. For members of our Indigenous community, it's time for reopening wounds and revisiting past atrocities. While we cannot change the past, we will look forward to establishing an inclusive future with our Indigenous community. One that acknowledges the truths and sets us on a path of reconciliation to build strong relationships with our Indigenous community on the principles of mutual trust, respect, equity, and inclusion. The board also extends our sincerest condolences and support to the Muslim community, both in London as well as here in Niagara, as we grieve the tragic deaths of an innocent family. This act of terrorism and Islamophobia is horrific, and there's no place for any hate-motivated crime in our community. This time I'll conduct the roll call. When I call your name, just tell us that you're here. Member D'Angela.
Here.
Member Eek.
Here.
Member Gale.
I'm here.
Member Gibson.
Present.
Member Lawson.
Here.
Member McKendrick.
Here.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of conflict of community or interest today? I don't see anything. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes. I have, which is item 3.1, the minutes of the public board meeting held on Thursday, May 20th, 2021, moved by members D'Angela and Eek, that the minutes of the public board meeting held Thursday, May 20th, 2021 be adopted as circulated. Are there any questions to those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. I got you, David. Reports from the board chair. In lieu of the joint steering committee meeting that was scheduled for June the 22nd, an email update was provided to the committee members. The joint committee is scheduled to meet on July the 27th to continue its review of the overall project progress and completion of deficiency work at one district facility. The next monthly report of the board is anticipated to be issued in August 2021, which will be the final report closing out the project of the new station. At this time, I can call on member Eek for an update as he is our liaison with this committee.
Thank you very much, Bill. This project is moving forward with a number of completed items that were deficient. The work on any deficient items is being conducted on the weekend basis to minimize any amount of disruption to the station. If there's a deficiency that's of immediate nature, mayor contractors are addressing these, and usually they're completed within hours, and if not, by the next day. For the public and anyone going by, probably the most outstanding deficient item is some dead sod that has been noted, and Stevensville Landscaping to replace that sod during the month of September. And September, of course, is so that we pass through the summer heat and ensure that whatever replacement there will continue to grow satisfactorily. The project remains on budget, and as our board chair has indicated, that the project, the closing is hoped to be wrapped up and finished at the end of August. So all is well, and I have heard of any other major deficiency or concerns that haven't been addressed, and perhaps I could ask the chief if there's something from his aspect in the service that if they're not being maintained, that we will certainly bring them up immediately. And it's to be hoped that by July 27th at our next meeting, that all will be well and concluded. So Chief, is there anything that you wish to speak on behalf of the service?
Chief?
Through you, Chair. No, I think Member Eek has captured everything that's ongoing with the build right now. Thanks.
Good. Thank you, Chief, and thank you, David, for the update.
Thank you very much.
The Canadian Association of Police Governance, the CAPG, they host monthly webinars as part of its educational strategy to keep police boards and police executives across Canada apprised of issues currently impacting the policing community. We have a webinar scheduled today at noon on the Manitoba Police Act review and recommendations. Depending on how late this meeting goes, it is available after the meeting, and you can get that through Deb because you can review the video on that at a future date. But it does pertain to the Manitoba Police Act. The CAPG will host its second governance summit on June the 30th from 11 to 3. The summit is entitled Policy Development in Police Governance. The session will discuss the development of the Toronto Police Service Board most significant policies, the race-based data collection, analysis and public reporting policy, and the body-worn camera policy. All board members have been pre-registered to participate, and connection details will be provided closer to the event date. Our upcoming meetings, there will be a bargaining committee meeting held in closed session on Thursday, July the 8th at 9 a.m. The next regular monthly board meeting will be held Thursday, July the 22nd at 9 a.m. And these meetings will be held by electronic participation through Zoom. Are there any questions with regards to the board chair's report? Thank you, board members. On to the report from the chief. Brian?
Thank you, Chair. I have no announcements, so I'll start off with the 2021 homicide and attempt homicides. During the reporting period from May 19th to June 22nd, there were 2 homicides that occurred, and there were no attempt murders. Year to date, we have 5 homicides that have occurred in 2021 and no attempt murders. Comparatively, in 2020, we had 5 for the year and 3 attempt murders. 2019, we had 7 homicides and 2 attempts. 2018, we had 2 homicides and 8 attempts. And 2017, we had 3 homicides and 3 attempt murders. Some information regarding the first homicide on Wednesday, May the 5th, just prior to midnight. Uniform officers responded to a report of a disturbance on King Street in Welland. Upon arrival, officers located a 54-year-old male suffering from critical injuries. The male was transported to an out-of-town hospital for treatment. Investigation determined that the male had been physically assaulted where he was located. In the days following the incident, a 32-year-old male and a 40-year-old male were arrested and charged with aggravated assault. On Friday, June 4th, unfortunately, the victim succumbed to his injuries, and as a result, charges laid against the 2 accused were upgraded to second-degree murder. The homicide unit now has carriage of this investigation, and this matter remains before the courts. The second homicide relates to an incident that occurred in Fort Erie on Wednesday, June 9th at approximately 11 p.m. Uniform officers were called to a residence on Mathewson Avenue in Fort Erie. On arrivals, officers located a 54-year-old male without vital signs. Male was subsequently pronounced deceased at the scene. The death was quickly determined to be a homicide, and an investigation commenced accordingly. In the days following the incident, 2 29-year-old males from Fort Erie were arrested, and each charged with second-degree murder. And again, our homicide unit has carriage of this investigation, and it remains before the courts as well. Moving on to our traffic fatality and serious collision statistics. During the month of May, there were 5 fatal motor vehicle collisions and 1 life-threatening injury that occurred during that time frame. Year to date, we have 9 fatal collisions that have occurred for 2021. Comparatively, we had 16 for all of 2020, 13 in the years 2018 and 2019, and 16 in each of 2016 and 2017. Some information regarding those fatal motor vehicle collisions, and as you'll see, there are really not a lot of similarities or trends that can be garnered from these collisions. The first on Saturday, May the 1st, officers responded to a report of a collision involving a 71-year-old female pedestrian and a motor vehicle on Main Street in Grimsby. Investigation determined that the pedestrian had been struck by a vehicle turning onto Main Street East from a private parking lot. Excuse me. Pedestrian was transported to hospital where she was subsequently pronounced deceased. This investigation into this matter continues by our collision reconstruction unit. Second one, on Tuesday, May the 11th, officers responded to a report of a single motor vehicle collision on Dorchester Road near Chippewa Parkway in Niagara Falls. Investigation determined that a motor vehicle had left the roadway, collided with a tree, and caught fire. 32-year-old female driver was pronounced deceased at the scene. A 59-year-old passenger was transported to hospital for treatment of non-life-threatening injuries. The investigation continues by our collision reconstruction unit. On Monday, May the 17th, officers responded to a report of an ATV collision, or an all-terrain vehicle, at a private property located on Regional Road 55 in West Lincoln. Initial investigation determined that an ATV was being operated by a 20-year-old female who resided on the property. The ATV struck a tree and the female sustained critical injuries. She was transported to an out-of-town hospital where she was pronounced deceased, and that investigation remains ongoing by our collision reconstruction unit. The fourth one, on Tuesday, May the 25th, a patrol officer was traveling on Welland Avenue in St. Catharines when he observed a mini motorcycle with no license plate being operated by a male without a helmet. The officer made a U-turn to follow the motorcycle, which turned north onto York Street. A short time later, the motorcycle turned left onto Taylor Street and struck a pole. Male was transported to hospital where he was pronounced deceased. As a result of the interaction between the officer and the deceased male, the SIU was notified and have invoked their mandate to investigate. Detectives from our collision reconstruction unit are conducting a parallel investigation into this matter as it pertains to the fatal collision. And the fifth incident on May 31st, officers responded to a report of a single motor vehicle collision on Concession Road 5 in West Lincoln. Investigation determined that a motor vehicle was traveling at a high rate of speed when it left the roadway, entering a drainage ditch, which caused the vehicle to roll. 23-year-old driver and sole occupant of the vehicle was transported to a local hospital where he was pronounced. The investigation continues by our reconstruction unit. And then the serious motor vehicle collision that occurred on Sunday, May 25th on Regional Road 27 in West Lincoln. Initial investigation revealed that a 63-year-old male was operating his motor vehicle at a high rate of speed when it left the roadway, entered a ditch, and rolled. The male was transported to an out-of-town hospital with life-threatening injuries where he currently remains. And that investigation is ongoing by our collision reconstruction unit as well. So May was certainly a very busy month for us. Some other items in the news. On May 30th, officers attended a residence in the area of Niagara Street and North Street in St. Catharines in response to a stabbing. Investigation revealed that a 36-year-old woman had gotten into a dispute with a 59-year-old woman. As a result, 36-year-old woman hit the 59-year-old woman with a stick multiple times and then proceeded to stab her twice. The victim was transported to an out-of-region hospital with life-threatening injuries. However, since has made a recovery and is now in stable condition. 36-year-old female has been arrested and charged with assault with a weapon and aggravated assault. Another item in the news: on June 1st, uniformed officers responded to a Niagara-on-the-Lake address for a possible found explosive. On arrival in the area of Lakeshore Road and Old Lakeshore Road, met with a member of the public. Officers learned that member of the public was a retired police officer and had been using an underwater scope in the shallows of Lake Ontario, approximately 50 feet into the water. Was believed to be a World War II artillery shell. The service's explosive disposal unit responded to the scene. The shell was safely removed to the beach to be investigated further. The shell had deteriorated significantly over time. At approximately 9 p.m., out of abundance of caution, our explosive disposal unit used explosive to destroy the shell. The area of west of Niagara-on-the-Lake Range historically was also used for World War II era training. With the rich military history in parts of Niagara, members of the public who discover possible explosives or ammunitions should avoid handling any found objects and contact the police immediately. Another item in the news: since the beginning of 2021, detectives from our Guns, Gangs, and Grow unit have been conducting an investigation into drug trafficking in the Niagara region. On June the 8th, with the assistance of our emergency task unit, the search warrant was executed at a residence in the area of Kenmure Avenue and Tanbark Road in Niagara-on-the-Lake. While entering the home, one of the suspects allegedly discharged a firearm in the direction of the officers. A search of the home resulted in the seizure of 200 grams of fentanyl with a street value of over $61,000, along with a firearm. Investigation led detectives to a second residence in St. Catharines. A third male was arrested at that residence, while a Canada-wide warrant was issued for another male. At that residence, 44 grams of fentanyl was seized with a street value of over $13,000. In all, $84,000 in currency was seized. 3 individuals were arrested and charged with multiple drug and firearms offenses, including reckless discharge of a firearm. And detectives continue to search for the 27-year-old male who's wanted in connection with this incident. And that, Mr. Chair, is my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief McCullough. Any questions to the chief with regards to his report? Member Gale?
Yeah, Chief, not knowing the full details of that last incident in St. David's on Tanbark Road, I guess a compliment to the officers. If this had been the United States, it probably would have been a different story with somebody firing a firearm. Your words were a firearm towards the officers or whatever. I'm proud our officers didn't react in a violent way, if you want to word it that way. And like the comparisons for what's happened south of the border. Do you want to comment on that, or is it as bad as I thought, and how it could have escalated if the officers had taken different action?
Chief?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think this incident really highlights the situation that our officers are encountering more and more frequently, unfortunately, with the prevalence of firearms, which, a few years ago we were seeing this occurring in the GTA, and it certainly has migrated to the Niagara region as well. And really proud of how our officers responded in this situation, as they respond to many similar types of incidents throughout the region. So again, pretty proud of how they're responding to this increase in violent crime.
So my compliments to you through the chair, to you, Chief, and to the officers involved in this, that it didn't escalate to the US style of guns of a blazing around. Thanks, Chair.
Great. Thank you, Member Gale. Any further questions? Okay. Again, thank you, Chief, for that. On item 6, presentations, we don't have any today. Item 7 is our consent items. We have items 7.1 through to 7.18. I'm going to have members Gale and Gibson move that this information be received. Are there any questions on any of these consent items? Member Lawson.
Yes, thank you. Of course, my questions are stuck on my screen right now. I was trying to be efficient and not print things. So 7.5, actually, the criminal harassment. I'm just wondering why there were so many not cleared reports for 2020.
Chief?
Thanks, Member Lawson, and through you, Chair. If you look at the actual number of incidents, you saw that there was a considerable spike in the number of incidents as well that were reported. So we went from 208 in 2019 to 294 in 2020. And you're quite correct, there are about 154 of those incidents were not cleared. In the vast majority of those were because there simply was not enough evidence to support the laying of a charge. The investigations were suspended, which in our terms means that all investigative leads were pursued. And then, again, there's nothing further to investigate, and it doesn't meet that criminal code threshold, so no charges were laid. I mean, we looked and we saw that there had been this spike. We looked into it, and there really are no trends that jump off the page. Other than anecdotally, we believe that COVID and the pandemic have probably played into the fact that a lot more people are at home, which has led to conflict occurring with neighbors, occurring with family and associates and whatnot. So I hope that helps to explain the trend that you see there.
Member Lawson?
Yeah, that would be great if there's a possibility of just adding maybe another column that just says that no charges can be laid, or something like that, just so that we see that it's not actually a trend that we need to be concerned about.
Okay.
I mean, that's typically our incidents that are not cleared fall into that category. That I mean, there can be other reasons as well. People choose not to want to have charges pursued. They just want to have the matter reported to have it on file in the event that there's further occurrences. So a number of different categories, but we can look to add that onto the report.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions on item 7.5? Okay. Member Lawson, any further questions on any other items?
Not until 7.12.
Okay. Any further questions then, guys? Okay, go ahead, Member Lawson.
Thank you for the question for 7.12, the annual report on problem-oriented policing. Page 5, there was a project compliance and St. Patrick's Day. Are these total costs shared with Brock University, or is the NRP, or was that the NRP portion, or is it a 50-50 split, or some other sort of split? I wasn't able to read through and find that answer. Sorry.
Chief?
Thanks, Member Lawson, through you, Chair. With regards to the costs incurred for St. Paddy's Day, our costs, the portion related to the service was actually lower. Given COVID, we did not see the numbers responding to the St. Paddy's Day festivities that we typically see. So our costs were approximately $2,838. It's not a 50-50 split. In this case, event about $9,500 was billed directly to Brock Universities as they had requested special duty officers to conduct off-campus community patrols. So Brock has certainly stepped up and recognized that many of their members who are living off campus have contributed to some of the past aggressions that we've seen at St. Paddy's Day. And they've taken a real proactive approach to work with us and to work with the community to address concerns before they actually happen.
Member
That's
Lawson,
fantastic. Thank you.
any further questions on item 7.12? Member Eek?
I apologize. No, at 7.10, I have a comment. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll deal with 7.12. Member D'Angelo?
Well, I was just going to make a comment that we appreciate in Thorold all the efforts you do on St. Paddy's Day and other days regarding students that are out of control. They are very harmful to the community. And anytime you can at least explain the rules and how they should behave, it's greatly appreciated. And the patrols are greatly appreciated. This year, as you mentioned, yeah, it wasn't as in past years. And it's also weather dependent. The warmer the weather, sometimes the more activity that happens outside that creates issues. So again, just very appreciative that everyone's working together, trying to make it so that everyone works in a friendly manner, living together in our community. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Member Lawson, any more items?
That's all for me. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Member Eek?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just a comment around report 7.10, which is the annual report, police response to ability. And these certainly are topics that have shown great interest with the public and the response by police to how they deal with this. And certainly our mobile crisis rapid response team is doing a very efficient and effective job. The calls for 2020 were down from 927 in 19 to 750, but the outcomes were such that they diverted 460 calls from the hospital, or 61% of those calls. And that's significant, particularly during this COVID crisis that we're dealing with at the hospitals. We've seen those items that have to be dealt with directly by the hospital. We've seen wait times with our and the public go from 87 minutes to 112. It's almost 2 hours of police time waiting, and divert these and resolve them is significant. And I'm hoping that in the future, this mobile crisis rapid response team will receive the funding necessary to expand it, and will be proven to the public to be dollars well spent. So those are my comments.
Okay, great. Thank you, Member Eek. Any further questions on item 7.10?
Just add a comment, Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to give a shout out to the Canadian Mental Health Association and the long-standing relationship that we enjoy with them. The personnel that they provide to our MCERT team as well as to the COAST team really does provide invaluable service to our community, and we would not be able to respond as effectively as we do to persons in crisis and to do the follow-up in the community without the assistance of the CMHA and our COAST and MCERT programs.
Great, thank you, Chief. Any further questions or comments on that one? Member McKendrick?
Thank you. And I just wanted to build on the Chief's comments that the partnership between CMHA and the service has been absolutely amazing. And it's all about ensuring that individuals in our community are getting the service they need when they need it. And very collaborative. And as we can see by the results, thank you thank you, Member Eek, for bringing that forward. It is having positive outcomes for our community. And I think we all support the possibility for expansion and advocacy for same. So also appreciative of the partnership and the members of the service who collaborate with us. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Any further questions on that one? Okay. Any other pieces of business on the consent items? Member Gale?
Thank you, Chair. Going to number 7.2, through you to the chief. Chief, I'll ask my question first, and then I'll give some backdrop to it. What is the standard to inform victims of crime? What are our protocols, and do we have protocols listed as to after a crime is committed, of advising the victims of crime as to arrests, convictions, updates, or anything like this? And the reason I bring this up, if you go to page 5 of the report on 7.2, there's a complaint there that's been resolved, I guess, but the person put down he or she had no info for a year about a family member that was involved in a serious assault. On page 6 on that, there's another complaint that was resolved. I think that the last sentence, the person wanted to know the outcome but never got a call back. I know back in the 90s when Chief Waddell was the chief of police, I had a meeting with him about my concerns about a robbery we had in Virgil at one of my stations that I never knew about it until I got a little comment from a police officer that was at a bar that I was talking to, and said, oh, they caught those guys. And then I had a theft at Bridge Street from a break and enter that I remember Dave Rotella showing up about a year later with stale cigarettes saying, oh, they arrested the guy and here's your evidence. And I didn't know anything about it. So again, based on what I just said, Chief, what's the protocols? And for the rest of the board, I'm not blindsiding the chief. The chief knew I was coming through with this question. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Brian?
Thanks, Member Gale, and through you, Chair. Our policy around assistance to victims and witnesses is really aligned with the Victims' Bill of Rights. And the expectations in our policy is that that our members provide victims of crime with it, a minimum of the information around arrest and when charges are laid, or in some cases where charges are not laid. We expect that they provide timely progress updates to investigations, including if and when an accused is released on an interim release order. In some cases, obviously, that doesn't happen, and there are complaints that follow arising from that. And again, that's the whole sole purpose of our professional standards unit is to conduct those conduct investigations. Again, it doesn't happen often, but we do hold our officers accountable and do have expectations which are clearly laid out in our policy.
So, Chief, thanks for that. And obviously, the investigation of the crime is paramount, and I get it. The last thing you do is notify the people, but they have to be notified. So, if there was a break-in right now at my location, and it was investigated, and somebody was arrested, who has the duty, or is there a set of guidelines that the court officer or somebody informs the victim that we arrested somebody, or we need more evidence? Is there something in writing that there has to be a follow-up?
Chief?
Through you, Chair. Yeah, our policy is pretty clear on that, and it's the officer in charge of the investigation that has the responsibility for ensuring that the victim of crime is made aware. And typically, in instances where somebody is held for bail and goes through the court process, it may be one of our court officers that reaches out to a victim to let them know about an interim release order, particularly where there are concerns around the safety of a victim.
Okay, thank you for that, Chief. As long as I know there's something in writing so that we have coverage for the officers, because it's been 25 years since that happened, and we had these 2 complaints on our report here on that item. So as long as there's something there, I'm good. Chair, I'm done with that item unless somebody else has any other questions on that.
Yep. 7.2, Member McKendrick on 7.2.
Yes, and thank you through you, Chair, to the Chief. I noticed in this report, and I'm sorry I didn't make a note of the page, but the complaint duration, there was quite a significant reduction in the time it took to resolve complaints from previous 90 days to 39 days. And I think that's remarkable. And I'm just wondering if we have any insight into influencing factors for that change in duration.
Chief?
I don't have any insights. Obviously, having worked in professional standards previously, a lot depends on the nature of the complaint and the complexity, number of complainants that need to be interviewed, etc. I believe Superintendent Mead is on the call. I don't know if he can provide any further insights or not.
Superintendent Mead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. The chief was quite right in the number of complexity factors in individual investigations. So we've also had some change of staff in professional standards. So as newer people come in, their workload isn't quite as heavy. So they get to investigations and can just look at specific investigations as opposed to being spread out about amongst a number of cases. Any of those factors could be at play, but I'm sorry, I don't have a very specific answer for you on that.
No, that's okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, any further on 7.2? Okay. Member Gale?
So going to item 7.17, and I imagine Gary Holden's on the line, Chief, is that correct?
That is correct, yes, he is here.
Okay, so through you, Chair, to the Chief on this, and this is regarding the mapping tool, and that comes with the sexual predators, or the sexual registered people. This is the item I brought up 2 meetings ago. So Chief, I have a question at the end of this, but it sounds like it's up to you on this, and it's a discussion I have, and I always defer to your wisdom on this, but the chief, more or less by me reading this report, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Chief, is that you have to weigh, is it better or safer for the people to know there are a number of registered sex offenders in an area so they can be more cautious or alert? Or is it harming the offender to have the info listed? I guess we have to agree to disagree if your stance is the first part of this, but I'm of the opinion that the public should know that there's a group of people, not a group, but there's registered sex offenders in their area. I'm not asking for addresses. I'm just asking, like we had the discussion at the council about COVID. And at the start of it, we wanted to know if there was a lot of COVID in an apartment building. So that firemen going in or whatever knew what was up. I think the public should know if, say, in the city of Niagara Falls or in a certain ward of Niagara Falls, there's 25 sex offenders registered or there's 0. So my question is twofold, or my comments right there, Chief, that you must take the stance that it is harming the offender to have this info listed. And is there any police forces in Canada that do allow the registered sex offenders in your area listed? I totally agree you don't give addresses out, but the area. Chief?
Chief?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the question, Member Gale. Yeah, I think the law is quite clear in terms of what we are permitted to release with regards to Christopher's law. As far as there are provisions within the Police Services Act where if there is an immediate risk to the public, I am permitted as the Chief of Police to release information to assist in ensuring that there are no further victimizations occurring. As far as other police services in Ontario, I believe are all following the same format that we provide in terms of not releasing that information. I'm going to turn to Gary Holden given his role with the Learning Committee with the OACP, I think Gary would be able to provide some further insights.
Great. Thanks, Chief. Gary?
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Member Dale, and through you, Mr. Chair. I can throw some other pieces of information out, and I probably should have put it in the PSB report. The Sex Offender Registration Act is actually stronger than the Christopher's Law Act. It's federal legislation. It weighs the two different principles between the privacy interests of the sex offender and the public interest in the rehabilitation and reintegration to the community as law-abiding citizens. They say the information is to be collected to enable police services to prevent or investigate crimes of a sexual nature. And it goes further to say access to the information and use of disclosure of it is to be restricted. We know our compliance rate here in our region is 98.8%. In the States, they do publish that information and their compliance rate is a lot less. The intent of the legislation was to allow us to monitor these individuals. If we don't have the ability to monitor them, they tend to go underground. And then if something happens in a certain jurisdiction, we don't know who was there, so we can't follow up on it. Just to further echo what the chief said, the intent of the legislation is under the PSA. For crime detection purposes, if something does go awry and we're not able to successfully monitor these people, we invoke Section 41 of the PSA, or soon to be Section 80 of the Community Safety Act, or Community Safety and Police Services Act. And that's how the legislation aligns for us to monitor these people. I can further indicate that we don't own the sex offender registry. The ministry does, and that's managed by the OPP. So we wouldn't have the direct ability to link the SOR with our crime mapping tool. I can advise that no other police service, to my knowledge, in Canada, and I have reached out to a few, publish this information on their crime reports mapping tool.
Okay.
Gail?
Okay, thank you for that, Gary. And through the chair to the chief to Gary, you don't own the registry of this. I get it. So is there ever, it says in the report that the police have the right or are allowed to find out this stuff. Is there ever a point when the police would be notified by the people that run the sexual part of their registry, whatever the wording is, to know that, hey, you've got a multitude of people in that area, or you've got a real bad individual that's in that area? Are you ever notified of that? Or is it just a registry that happens, and if you find a crime happened, then you are backing up and looking at who's in our area? Or is it ever proactive that the chief or the police service find out that we've got some, and I'll use the term, bad individuals in our area?
Gary?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So we do have access. We don't own the application, but we do have direct access. And I can advise currently we have 2 members who actively participate in reviewing that all the time on a consistent basis. So they're well aware of all the sex offenders within our jurisdiction, and they have reporting rights that they have to report once a year. Plus they do address checks periodically. So it is a database that we're actively monitoring.
So that makes me a lot more comfortable with it, that we have eyes on it, that if there's if it's bad that way. One other thing that you said, Gary, there's a 98.7% compliance rate. Why would it not be 100%? Is there times when somebody slipped and 1% of the people names have been released or something? I don't understand that.
Gary?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So not being one of the sex offender coordinators, I can't 100% answer that, but it could be a myriad of reasons. Sometimes people, the legislation, Christopher's Law is provincial legislation. If they move outside of the province, they're not obligated to follow that part of the act anymore unless they're in the NSOR. So then they don't have to report to us, or maybe they've moved and they haven't given us the new address within a certain time frame. So that could be the reason. However, if they are non-compliant and we get the information, we do have the ability to issue an arrest warrant. And then at that time, the chief has the authority to release the information to the public.
So thank you for this, Chair, Chief, and Gary. This has been enlightening because at least the public now is on record of knowing there's a couple officers that are watching over this. I'd hate to be in their position to have to see this, but I guess my last question on it is, if these officers find there's something wrong with locations. There's something wrong on what they've found. And let's say there's 100 people within a square block. Who would they bring that to? Do they bring it to the deputy chiefs or the senior command?
Gary?
I'll have to defer that one to the chief or one of the deputies. I believe that's the case, but not being one of the coordinators, I'll pass that question on.
Chief?
Through you, Chair. The offender management unit, which comprises of 2 detective constables responsible for monitoring the actions of any of the sex offenders who are part of the sex offender registry. When they become aware of the fact that somebody is not in compliance, they have the ability to put out an arrest warrant, lay charges against the individuals, and that's where the 98.8% compliance comes in, is that 98.8% of the time the sex offenders in our region are compliant. So it's only a very small occasion when they're not. And in those instances, through the chain of command, the officers would notify their supervisors. Charges can be laid, again, if it's appropriate for charges to be laid, and where there are serious issues of risk to the community, we can put a bullet note to our public to make them aware of it.
So thank you for that, Chief. These are great answers, and Gary too. And I see the nodding of the deputy chiefs that they're all agreeing with this. So that's good on this. I guess things change if it ever got out of hand and there was horrendous crimes done. But for now, I think this is fine, and I guess that's where we have to go. So thank you, Chair. That's a good report and good responses.
Good. Thank you, Member Gale. Any further questions on 7.17? Member McKendrick.
Yeah, and thank you. I understand it's a difficult conversation, and when we hear about those kind of crimes against most vulnerable people in our community, we want to make sure that we're providing the most safety. And I'm inspired by the 98.8% compliance rate and how the legislation that's been put in place is increasing that comparable to other countries. And I know ethically and morally it can be difficult to hear and think that these individuals are in our community. And I just wanted to bring attention to the balancing of reintegration and rehabilitation, and knowing that what's happened in the past can be heinous and difficult. We also, I would encourage a spirit of people do have the ability to rehabilitate and reintegrate into community. And with the compliance and the monitoring and the resources put into keeping tabs on that, I think our community can feel confident that, that there's protection there. My question was from 7.9 and 7.17, which is around the 98.8% compliance rate. And I'm just wondering if we have comparison to other areas, because 98.8 is great. And what about that other 1.2 is the question. So I'm just wondering if we have a comparison to other areas or not.
Chief?
Thanks for your comments and for the question. I don't have that information. I'm not sure if Deputy Flynn or Superintendent Ash would have that. If not, we can reach out and provide that information at a later date. I'll turn it over to Deputy Flynn at this point, though.
Deputy?
Thanks, Chief. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Chief. I don't have that information. I don't know that it's, I mean, the fact that we're reporting on it publicly, I would imagine that other police agencies across our province do. So in the absence of any knowledge of Superintendent Ash, we can just undertake to look and provide the board with information on whether that is a standard across the province.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions on 717? Seeing none, okay. Any further items that anyone wants to bring up? Member D'Angelo.
Oh, thanks, Chair. The item I wanted to bring up was 7.3, the K9 unit. Just wanted to make a few comments regarding that. I don't really have too many questions, but just to actually express my thanks and for the K9 unit, because if you look at the chart that's on page 3, they assisted. They had over 1,400 calls, and they assisted in arrest of 56 arrests. And I know when we were toured at our facilities, they did give us a demonstration of the K9 unit. I wouldn't want to be chased by a dog if I was doing anything illegally, because they were quite efficient in tracking down the suspect. I just wanted to provide, because I think it's a good news story in the sense that locally here in Thorold, I know the training facility is located at the yard, but they also work with local businesses, and there is a sign up at the lumberyard location in Thorold that the K9 unit trains there also. So it's a good way of showing a partnership between the local businesses and the NRPS and how they work together in our communities. But the point I wanted to make, because I just had this comment made to me a week ago, someone was asking me questions about that. So it's a good way to highlight what our units are doing in a good professional manner, so that the community understands that they're getting good value for these units, because they're not always very prevalent in our community sometimes. But when they see signage that says the NRPS K9 training unit works in this location, I think it's great. I think it's great for our community. And like I said, I've had positive comments, so I just wanted to pass that on, that signage really works to heighten the awareness of what we're doing with different units. That's basically my comment. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Member D'Angela. Any further questions on item 7.3? Okay. Any further items, members? Okay. Oh, Member McKendrick?
Yes, and thank you. Regarding 7.14, sexual assault investigations, on page 4, happy to see that there's been started a Niagara Region Sexual Violence Advocate Case Review Committee. And I'm probably going to ask another question that you don't have the answers to, so I'm sorry. Really happy to see that that's happening, to identify system problems that may be impacting successful outcomes for those charges or those investigations. And assuming it's too early to have been able to identify those system problems, but just wondering if there has been some identification of problems that could be addressed as an example of what that committee may bring forward.
Chief?
Thank you for the question, Member McKendrick. Through you, Chair, I'm going to turn it to Superintendent Ash to see if he's aware of any additional information. I don't have the answer to that question, unfortunately.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Chief. And actually, we don't have the answers. It is too new at this point. There's nothing reported back on the successes yet. But I would anticipate we should have that, in the next month or so, and we could report then.
Great, thank you. Member McKendrick?
Yeah, thank you. And I anticipated it was too new, and just wanted to thank you and all involved for starting such a committee so that there is that possibility. So thank you.
Good, thank you. Any further questions on 7.14? Any further items, members? So it's been duly moved and seconded. All in favor, please raise your hand. And that's carried. Item 8, new business. We have item 8.1, budget planning 2022 operating and capital budgets. I'll have members Lawson and McKendrick move that the board approve the budget timetable in accordance with Niagara Region Bylaw 2017-63. Budget control is outlined in Appendix 1 and 2 of the report. And further, that the board approve the recommendations set forth by the service staff that are documented in this report, which will form the guiding principles for the development of the 2022 budget. Any questions on this, members? Member Gale.
I just want to compliment the service. I see that they're trying for 2%. I know how hard that would be to get to 2% just with the contracts alone. I know at the region, it's been reported in the news and it's public that we said up to 4.1% as an opening salvo that I now disagree with, but I'm proud that the force is trying for 2%, and good luck with that, Chief. Thanks.
Good. Thank you, Member Gale. Any further questions on 8.1? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. And that's carried. 8.2, records classification and retention schedule. I'll have members Eek and Gale move that the board accept and append the fully updated records classification and retention schedule, including Schedule A, business activities, Schedule B, law enforcement activities, offense and general investigations, and Schedule C, law enforcement activities, areas and services programs to Board Bylaw 291-2009. Any questions on 8.2? Member Gibson.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the Chief. Chief, there's, I believe, an understanding within the public that as soon as a record is obtained by the police, a name, that sort of thing, and it goes into the database, it's there forever. Could we, in layman's terms, generally explain for public consumption here, generally the retention periods for various crimes? I know like a very minor summary conviction offense might only have a retention period in our records for 2 years, and then it's gone, sort of thing. Most of the public doesn't know that. Would we be able to just simply highlight that very, simply to the public, how that works?
Chief?
Through you, Chair, we're very fortunate to have Gary Holden, who chaired the Learn Committee and has been, really instrumental throughout the province in developing a retention schedule. So I probably wouldn't do justice to what Gary would be able to provide. So I'm going to turn it to Gary, and he can provide as succinctly as he can. Bearing in mind the retention schedule, I think, is about 180 pages.
Yeah.
Hopefully he can provide you with that synopsis.
Yeah, I'm just looking for a very high level for the public to consume, because everybody thinks it's there forever. So
good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Gary?
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Member Gibson, and through you, Chair. Yes, that's a very good question. I can answer it in a couple ways. Number one, we do not keep information forever. That's why we created 3 different schedules in the retention schedule. And just to correct the Chair, it was actually Lori Switch, our information management supervisor, who actually chaired the Learn Committee, who worked on it, but then her and I together recrafted the NRPS records retention schedule based on the Learn toolkit. But what we've done is now we're willing to make this a public document. So we're going to put it on our website, and I understand the board also puts it on their website. So what we did was we broke it into 3 areas so people can understand, or the public can understand. If it's a minor offense, we might only keep it for 5 or 10 years. If it's a threshold offense, then we might need to keep it for 25 years. And that's the benefit of this new retention schedule. It clarifies that so people can go online and look at it and see, okay, I actually don't have to worry about it being there any longer. We also publish other information on our website that if somebody has a charge that results in a non-conviction, they can go on our website and see that they have the ability to ask us to delete that information as well. So we're being a lot more transparent, putting as much on our website as possible, understanding that by and large, the public doesn't understand law enforcement databases and how long everything is kept. But we have been pretty clear in itemizing the difference between threshold offenses and non-threshold offenses. And if it's of a minor nature, we will delete that information.
Okay, thank you. Member Gibson.
Okay, that's a very good high-level explanation. It's what I was looking for. I think you can still apply for parole at 5 years, and your record is expunged. And so, yeah, record retention is an interesting thing, and it's something that pops up periodically when you're talking to people. The police got my name; they'll be there forever, and that sort of thing. When in fact, that's not true. And I also believe the policy on this is guided by provincial law.
Gary?
That's correct. Through you, Mr. Chair. It's also under the Municipal Act. It's under the Police Services Act. And there's a lot of citations that we had to incorporate as well into the retention schedule.
Okay, thank you. So just for the public, then it's obviously, we're just simply following provincial law as required by the province to make sure that we're operating properly. So that's my question. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Member Gibson. Any further questions on 8.2? All in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. 8.3, Records Management System, the RMS, Annual Support Renewal, June 1st, 2021 to May 31st, 2022. I'll have members Gibson and Lawson move that the board approve payment of invoice number 2104-062 in the amount of $192,078.11, including HST, and this is net of rebates, to Versaterm for continuation of the maintenance support services being provided for the Services Records Management System, the RMS. Questions on this one? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And that's carried. Item 8.4, Computer Aided Dispatch, or CAD, Annual Maintenance and Support Renewal, March 1st, 2021 to February 28th, 2022. Moved by members McKendrick and D'Angela that the board approve payment of invoice number 2012-024 in the amount of $274,589.18, including HST, net of rebates, to Versaterm for the continuation of the maintenance support services being provided for the services Computer Aided Dispatch, or CAD system. Any questions on 8.4? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Last item under number 8 is the 8.5 Special Fund Request Annual Niagara Golf Marathon, moved by members Eek and Gale, that the board authorize a donation in the amount of $250 for a whole sponsorship in support of the Niagara Golf Marathon fundraising initiative. Any questions? Member Gale?
Yeah, Chair, I just want to make sure that there is police involvement in this. I take it there is, but what our rules are, it has to fight crime. Police have to be involved or stuff like this. I would take it that there's police actively there. I don't see it on the report.
Chief?
Through you, Chair. I don't believe that we have anybody that's actually involved with the Niagara Golf Marathon, other than to say that the charities that are going to benefit from the golf marathon are certainly aligned with our service and our core values.
Gee, okay. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to vote against this. Our rules are, and they're all great charities, but our rules are that it has to be aligned with fighting crime, or there has to be police involvement in it. Otherwise, we could end up with every charity coming to us for $250 on that. And I hate like hell doing this on this, but it's our rules on this, Chair. Chief, please argue against me on this, because they're all great charities, but we can't have all charities coming to us for our police board money.
Chief?
I mean, really, I'm in the board's hands in terms of the request. I can advocate on behalf of the group. I know that they're very well-intentioned individuals who volunteer a lot of time in, I think it's 100 holes of golf that they play. The money is going to good causes within the community. It's really up to the board as to whether or not you feel it's appropriate to approve a special fund request.
So, Chair, I leave it with, I have to vote no against this, because what's stopping us from a charity in Port Colborne calling us that has nothing to do with the police, even though this is money from stolen goods that have been auctioned and things like this, that's not our point here. Our point has always been anything to do with police officers' involvement or fighting crime. And I can't interpret it this way on this, and I hate to vote against this because they're all great charities, but that's my point. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. I had members D'Angelo, then member Lawson. Member D'Angelo?
Thanks. I'm sort of leaning towards what Bob's mentioning here because, but I do have one question. Normally, when a charity or we make this donation out of our special funds, there's a recognition of what was contributed in the past. Is this a first-time request for this this amount? Through you, Chair. Pardon?
To the chief.
So yes, I believe this is a first-time request.
Okay, I'm concerned like member Gale that because it's not specifically to a police initiative that we're opening ourselves up because there's so many golf tournaments that we're going to be sponsoring holes for almost every golf tournament that supports community care, port cares, and all the others that are great community charities that help individuals. We're sort of in a tough position here, so I'll have to come up with my vote here. But yeah, I don't want to really vote against it, but it's not following our policies, so it puts me in a position where I'm going to have to vote against it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Member Lawson?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was actually going to echo what Member D'Angelo had said, is that I'm not versed enough in what the actual rules are surrounding our donations. I would like to suggest that, of course, we use common sense when we're making our donation requests, which in this case, based on the fact that it's things that directly impact our different mental health programs that we're supporting and promoting it with the Niagara Regional Police, I would lean towards actually voting towards it. But at the same time, if it's not following the rules that we're supposed to, which again, I'm not entirely sure where those rules are, then I would again have to vote against it. So I'm kind of up in the same air. My heart's saying that we should be approving it because obviously it's supporting the type of programs that the police are very involved in and supports the community. But at the same time, I understand Member Gale's and Member D'Angelo's comments. So again, I'm kind of up in the air as well.
Thank you, Member Lawson. Member Gibson?
Thank you, Chair. And whichever way this vote goes, I always like to bring up the fact for the public that this is not their tax dollar. It's in the report, but I always like to just voice that these dollars are from found items, the auction of bicycles and that sort of thing, and it's not your tax dollars. So I just like to always bring that point up. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Member Gibson. Member Gale?
Chair, Member Eek has not spoken. I'm going to ask if this item, this golf tourney, what's the date of it coming up? Do you know?
August, yes, I do. It's August 17th.
May I ask Member Eek if he would defer this to the next meeting and we be provided by Deb with the rules with regards to our donations so we can make a decision in our July meeting on this? If Member Eek thinks that's wise, yes. Because I think then at least our rules will be spelled out because like someone said earlier, the floodgates could open.
Great.
Thank you, Bob. I would be pleased to move forward with that.
And I'll second it, Chair, if you want.
Okay, so to defer this to the next meeting and then next meeting. And then Deb can get the policy to us all, so at least we can read it and go through it. And I've got a seconder as Member Gale. There are no questions on a deferral. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, that ends section 8. Other new business. I'm glad to see that was deferred. Maybe through Deb and myself, we can get together on this policy and just kind of look at it, get it out to members, and we can maybe make tweaks to it because things need to be updated from time to time. We do that in the city of Port Colborne with our granting program. We're always updating it and making sure the rules are tight so that, as what Member Gale said, that we're not donating to things that really are against the policy. So can work on that between now and the next meeting and get comments from all our members. Other than that, we have item 10, in-camera reports. These are for public release from the April 22nd, 2021 and the May 2021 2021 confidential meetings. Item 10.1 is the contract renewal for audit services, Police Service Board Special Funds Account and our NRPS Financial Operations. And item 10.2 is Special Investigations Unit, SIU Case 21-OCD-018, incident of January 13th of 2021. I'll have members Gibson and Lawson move that in accordance with the board direction, the above noted in-camera reports be received for public information. Questions on either of those? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. It's 10:10. We'll reconvene at 10:20. I'll move that, or I'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you, board members and staff.